Is Delegate LaRocque here?
He is.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Peake.
Hello, Delia. Simple little bill you got here.
It really is, actually.
Do we have a substitute?
Yes, please. I asked Brian to.
Is there a motion to accept the substitute?
Move to accept substitute.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Okay, we have the substitute in front of us, Delegate.
Yeah, I will explain the bill. I'll explain the bill and the substitute at the same time for simplicity's sake. What we're asking is that personnel in a school would report a child who has decided to transition in the school openly when the student involves the school and the school personnel. Secondly, we would establish that schools should not encourage students to exclude their parents. We would define abuse so that it does not include misgendering. And fourth, we propose a basis for a plan that would, if a child was going to be counseled in the school, that would involve parents and perhaps professional counseling if that was the school's choice to formulate such a plan. That essentially is the bill. I'd be glad to. The substitute, if I may, is different only in respect to what the point is that the school would become obligated to report. So hearing testimony in committee, addressing questions and conversation on the floor, recognized there was a concern that as written and as passed out of the House, that there would not be an opportunity for a school counselor to just, we'll say, discuss a child who might be contemplating or, wanted to explore the possibility of a gender transition. And I think we agree that those conversations could be beneficial and allow a child to have some not counseling, but basically just some degree of adult involvement that would be way short of a full-fledged decision to involve the school. So the substitute language on or about line 20 is written so as to, and I can read that language if I may.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so section B, each public elementary or secondary school, I'm starting on line 17, principal or his designee shall, as soon as practicable, inform at least one parent or minor student enrolled in such school if such minor requests that any individual who is employed in the school participate in the transition of such minor to a sex or gender different from the minor's biological sex while at school, including the use of pronouns that are inconsistent with the minor's biological sex. So again, in the testimony in the subcommittee, full committee, that is, I think, could be accurately referred to as outing a child. We've tried to structure the substitute so that it wasn't outing a child who would not be outing, because this is a case of a student who was openly transitioning or transitioned in the school, asking the school to participate, identifying the child differently. And at that point, perhaps the only ones that wouldn't know would be the parents if the student had not chosen to inform the parents yet. So hopefully that is of some significance in this. I think that what we've learned, hopefully from Sage, who is the namesake of this bill, is that when a child who is impressionable, perhaps some degree of innocence, and going through a difficult part of their life, is making this sort of very important decision, that the school can play a different role. They could be encouraging, they could be affirming, they could would hope that they would say, this is something you should talk to your parents about. This would obligate that because some schools are doing just the opposite. Unfortunately for Sage, her life is a living example, or lived, I should say, of what can go wrong under what is in place now. And so her mom is here to tell us a little bit about that experience. We've asked her to keep it very short out of respect for the committee's time. And but I think there's other children like Sage. We've heard from many of them. This has a certain amount in common with what took place in Loudoun County. In fact, Jess Smith, the parent of the child who became quite the center of a lot of conversation in Loudoun, was here to join in solidarity with Michelle, who's here with us today. So Sage is one girl. I think we could admit that she made some decisions that didn't bode well for her. But what I hope the committee would see is that the school system could have helped her make better decisions and turn her toward parental involvement and perhaps counseling. I would point out to the committee that I think it's very relevant that there is a bill that came through committee that will require, if it's passed, 24-hour notice, maximum 24 hours before a parent is notified if bullying takes place. And the testimony included parents whose children were no longer alive. Now, I don't want to equate a gender transition exactly to bullying, but I think what they have in common is that it involves a young child who's in a difficult position, making a big decision that may affect them for the rest of their life. And I hope the committee would agree that involving parents in such a decision, as with bullying or other situations that where the child is preparing to make a decision, that it's better to have the parents involved. I have in this binder that I hope everyone in the committee has seen, and I won't read from it, but I'll tell you it is here that I may state some opinions, but I feel very confident that the suggestions in this bill to involve parents and to not rush to early transitioning are supported very widely by some very, very credible experts. There was a brief that we have used, and I referenced it in the House testimony. Dr. Erica Anderson, 40 years in a career heading organizations that are dedicated to best practices for transgender medicine and how to treat children from a psychologist's perspective. And very strong consensus that the best approach is to not jump to an immediate early affirmation, to evaluate the child for the full range of things that are going on in that child's life, and then definitely, almost unanimously, if not unanimously in this brief, was the consensus that parents should be involved, that the child would be better off if parents would be involved. So I just would say that I hope this experience that Sage has gone through could be the starting point for some legislation, this legislation, to make it difficult or maybe impossible for another child to be kind of guided in the wrong directions, where the predators can be lurking to prey on a child who is just not in a right frame of mind. So with that, I would say that's a fairly good overview, open to questions and open to testimony.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any questions, Senator Peake?
No questions for the patron, Madam Chair. We're going to hear a lot of testimony. I'd like to make a comment so people could address, who are going to address it opposite, if I may. And this is a horrible situation, a tragic situation. And Delegate, thank you for looking out for the person that happened to, it's actually in my district in Appomattox. And I know this is a very sensitive topic for everyone and a very tough topic. But I just, and people are going to speak against this bill, and I know there'll be a number of them, and I understand that. And what I focus on is what we have seen, and the studies are coming out, and it's all over the internet recently, the high propensity of mental health problems and suicides for children who are undergoing gender identity issues, and a much higher rate of suicide. And so it concerns me that parents would not know, or that we would not share that with the parents so that they could be on the lookout for what their children may be going through and what signs their children may be going through. And I've talked to numerous groups and I understand that a number of these households and parents may not be supportive and could actually be dangerous. And I would hope to point out that any time a parental situation is violent or dangerous, that Child Protective Services could be brought in. And so as we discuss this, I would just like to focus on the part that parents need to know what their children are going through, especially if it's something that may lead to suicide. Same as bullying, which we talked about earlier, what happened to that poor girl in New Jersey. So we have horrible bullying incidents, and social media has made it that much worse. And if parents don't have any idea what their kids are going through, it can lead to these tragic situations. So I hope we can focus on that aspect of it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. And because there is considerable interest in this particular bill, I know we have many speakers here today, so I ask that we limit comments on both sides, 5 minutes each, so if we'll keep track of that, thank you. So anyone who is here to support the legislation, please come forward, and they'll need to speak into the microphone. Delegate.
Good morning. I am Michelle Blair. I'm Sage's mom, otherwise known as Nana. Because she is also my granddaughter, I adopted her after my son passed away. By the time I was able to bring her home, she had spent more than a year in 6 different foster homes and had a lot of trauma to recover from even as a baby. But what she went through in just a few weeks after she started high school was far, far worse. No child should ever have to go through the horrific ordeals Sage did. And I'm grateful that you have the power to change the policies that led to her abuse. When Sage started high school, just 14 years old in August 2021, she told the school she was identifying as a boy and asked the school to conceal that from us, her parents. So the school used male pronouns and a new name and told her to use the boys' bathroom. And they went along with her request to keep it all a secret from me. And their participation in that lie had a terrible domino effect. We were also not informed about the terrible bullying and the threats of rape. Why wasn't I informed? The thing is, like most kids who identify as trans, Sage had a history not only of trauma, but of mental health issues, including medication and a recent hospitalization, all of which I had told the school. I am a volunteer CASA. I am trained in how to support kids experiencing trauma and mental health issues. And if I had known such critical secrets were kept from me, I would have had a chance to step in. But the school robbed me of the opportunity to protect my child. They stole my rights as a mom to support my child in her time of such dire need. 2 weeks after school started, Sage told me in tears she'd been assaulted by a group of boys in the boys' bathroom, and in fear, she ran away later that night. She had been given transgender websites by her school counselor and thought she was meeting an online friend, but no, it was a predator. She was abducted, she was gang raped, she was drugged, she was taken by traffickers, sex traffickers to Maryland for 9 days of abuse until the FBI found her and told us to come get her. When we arrived in Maryland, a judge kept her from us for more than 2 months. First they put her in prison, then in foster care, based on false claims we were abusing her in connection with misgendering, which I found to be terribly ironic, since the school had deceived us about her claim to be trans. We didn't even know until it was too late. She had disappeared into the night. The judge placed Sage, my child, a victim of sexual horrific abuse, in the male quarters of a state children's home, where boys assaulted her again. Sage told me later that the attorney assigned to her told her to lie about her abusing so she could make a legal case all the way to the Supreme Court. And the attorney also lied and told my precious child that I didn't want her anymore. I was not even allowed to visit or speak with her. Sage ran away from the state home on Maryland's watch, which she was lured again to an online predator. She disappeared for months this time. She was drugged, she was beaten, she was locked up and raped and sexually exploited until the marshals finally rescued her in Texas. Today, Sage looks back and tells me she doesn't know who she was then, that she was never a boy, she just wanted to have friends. And yet every authority jumped on gender and made life-changing, disastrous choices for my child that we were powerless to stop. So this is why we need Sage's law. Sage is not alone. I've heard from families all over this state and country that have been torn apart by schools and courts, and it is heartbreaking. Unlike parents, these schools and courts do not have a child's best interest at heart. They are driven by ideology. Sage's law is as basic common sense as it gets. Parents, we need to know what is going on with our own children at school. Parents, we have the right to raise our children because we know them and we love them the best.
Ma'am.
Sage actually watched
Ma'am.
both of these.
We have other speakers who wish
okay.
to speak in support.
Okay.
And how many minutes do we have left?
I'm just about done.
We have 30
Okay,
seconds
okay.
left.
We can't fix what happened to Sage, but you can
Ma'am,
help prevent
It's
it.
30 seconds for all remaining speakers
For
as
all
well.
remaining
Yes,
speakers?
5 minutes total on both sides. So thank you very
No, I
much for
understand, I understand.
sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm very sorry to hear what has happened. So if we can speak very quickly, if you want to just state your
Sorry,
support.
but I find it hard that we listen to many more minutes of talk about books and we can't hear the victim of such terrible policies hear her whole story. I'm Laura Hanford. I'm a mom from Fairfax with a background in international human rights. This really isn't a partisan issue. Just in the team working to pass Sage's law, we have parents of all beliefs. Some of them testified in the House hearings: Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians, and progressives. Overwhelmingly, parents do not want to be kept in the dark. I have children Sage's age. In fact, my son turns 14 today, and I'm asking you to set aside the party labels and consider how any of you would feel if the child you loved had been secretly affirmed, bullied, and assaulted at school until she or he reached a breaking point, and you knew nothing about it until it was too late. Think about it for a moment. The first rule of predators is don't tell your parents. The second is they don't love you and you aren't safe with them, but you are with
Ma'am,
me.
we've run out of time, so.
Okay. That's a choice you were able to make, Madam Chair. I would really appreciate it if you let parents make that.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a few more speakers. How many speakers in support of the legislation, if you could just let me know? Okay, are you the last speaker, just the last two, or are you the only one? If you can just quickly, within 10 seconds.
Yes, my name is Ryan Heath. I represent the interests of Sage and Michelle Blair. I'm their attorney. I just simply want to say that, frankly, this bill is so important because what this does is it prevents school teachers and counselors from indoctrinating children into a cult, a religion, frankly.
Thank you. Thank you.
To be blunt, without this bill, more children will be hurt.
Thank
So
you. Thank you very much. 10 seconds, please.
Madam Chairman, Josh Hetzler on behalf of the Family Foundation and the Founding Freedoms Law Center. We support the bill. I just want to say that Delegate LaRock's substitute addresses the only concerns that we heard about this bill, so I hope you like favorably.
Thank you.
Susan Musket with Pro Family Women. We support the bill.
Thank you. Okay. So we have speakers in opposition, and again, we will apply the 5-minute rule. So please keep your comments brief. Please speak directly to the bill itself. So please come forward.
Thank you for your time. Narissa Rahman, Executive Director of Equality Virginia. The sole purpose of this bill is to harm trans non-binary students. It serves no other purpose than to put them in a safe environment, both at school and potentially at home. These kids deserve the safety to thrive. And when we remove potential supportive adults at schools and the support systems, we put them at great risk, not only for physical violence, but also impacting their mental health and their ability to want to attend school. Trans and non-binary youth have always existed in Virginia. They will continue to exist in Virginia. This legislation, will not minimize or decrease the number of trans students we have in Virginia. What it is only going to do is remove supportive systems and systems of care for these kids. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just ask a question. So what you were saying is that with a bill such as this, then students who are already feeling vulnerable and marginalized have the potentiality of being further marginalized, feeling that there are no safe spaces for them to share their concerns and their issues and talk to an adult.
Yes, correct. Trans and non-binary students face, are stigmatized, and it's largely around the debate around their humanity and dignity. When they have supportive adults in their life, such as teachers, counselors, other school personnel, it can actually reduce their risk of suicide by up to 40%.
And we have the data and the research that supports that.
Chair,
I've seen that.
I have a question, a follow-up question.
Yes,
Thank you.
please go
I don't
ahead.
see anything in this bill that prohibits the school from working with the student. What in this bill prohibits the school from continuing to work with the student?
Well, I think the goal of the bill is to take information, that the student is living authentically at school and put them at risk at home.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Must not be able to read.
Please come forward.
Good morning, Chair and members of the subcommittee. My name is Brianna Diaz, and I am Policy and Legislative Counsel for the ACLU of Virginia, and we strongly oppose this bill and urge you to reject it for the reasons previously stated. And I do want to add to one point that, this bill is framed as not forcibly outing youth. However, I want to make clear that outing is not a one-time decision, but is a lifetime situation where LGBTQ folks, queer folks, including myself, have, choose every day who we come out to. And that is a risk assessment that we must take. And that takes that autonomy and choice away from youth to make that risk assessment of who they share their authentic selves with, and places them, as Narissa just said, at great risk of harm at home and in the school environment. And so, again, we strongly urge you all to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good morning. I am Monica Hutchinson, and I am actually here speaking as a mother today, and I am a mother of a trans child. And I am here to oppose this bill because, it is extremely painful to listen and watch others just assume that every child lives in a loving and supportive home. They do not. As the mother of a trans daughter, my child has got friends who are trans. They have friends who are struggling with their identity. And sadly, at home, they don't have the support that they need to navigate this. Having that safe and supportive space at school where someone is just there for them, to listen to them, is crucial. And I understand that parents want to be brought into the loop, but I say this as a parent. If your child is not coming to you, there's a reason why. And there is issues that you have got to deal with, and it is not because of the school. I don't say that lightly. Like I said, none of us are perfect. No parent is perfect. But as the mother of a trans child, I oppose this, and I ask you to as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have just 2 minutes remaining on the clock, and so if remaining speakers will be very succinct and speak directly to the bill, and if you just want to say you oppose, or if you oppose the bill, that's fine too.
The Virginia Education Association opposes this bill. While we have a lot of sympathy for Sage and her deal, we think that this bill would unintentionally put a lot of kids at risk of harm in a different set of scenarios.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Senator Peake. Jonathan Iglesias with the Virginia Sexual and Domestic Violence Action Alliance. Our sexual and domestic violence advocates actually strongly oppose this bill, and while we certainly have a deep well of sympathy for the experience that Sage endured, the reality is that this is not an actual sexual violence prevention strategy, nor is it a human trafficking prevention strategy. And many of our agencies run sexual violence prevention programs and human trafficking transitional housing, youth programs, and this is just simply something that would create an environment that is hostile and intolerable of trans identities for young people and push them into further risk of experiencing trafficking and sexual violence.
Would you agree with the statement that disproportionately the number of homeless youth are students or children that identify as LGBTQ?
Yes. I don't have the stat pulled up in my brain right now, but yes, a majority of LGBTQ youth, they're overrepresented in the homelessness population, and 1 in 3 young people who are pushed into homelessness because of conditions like this, within the first 48 hours end up becoming involved with sex trafficking and human trafficking. And so we are therefore creating conditions that are certainly pushing more students into these conditions.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker.
I'm Abby Phillips of the Legal Aid Justice Center, and we oppose this bill, but I do want to say I know how difficult it is for families to share their personal stories in front of a committee, and I do want to thank all the families for their time today and what they presented, and our compassion extends to all of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay. Any other comments? Delegate LaRocque, would you like to close out this discussion?
Thank you very much.
If you would.
The amicus brief I referenced has many good quotes. I'll read one briefly. Every major professional association recommends a thorough professional evaluation to assess, among other things, the underlying causes of a child's or adolescent's feelings and consider whether a transition be beneficial. The American Psychological Association, for example, recommends a comprehensive evaluation, a consultation with parents and youth to discuss, among other things, the advantages or disadvantages of a social transition during childhood. The Endocrine Society makes a similar recommendation. So briefly, in response to some of the comments, I would say that the substitute allows a safe space. We can deliberately included a wording that would allow a safe space before a school would report. This only deals with children who have students who have outed themselves in school. We really don't want the parents to be the last ones to know. When there's threat of harm at home, then there are the school personnel are already mandatory reporters, and we expect that they would do their job. I think it's an insult to parents for so many people to assume that parents would not act as parents do so often, and that is to help the children. I want to try to flip around the testimony that we just heard that says that a high percentage of youth who identify as LGBTQ end up either being sex trafficked or they are homeless. What we mentioned in this bill is having a plan in place so that when these sort of decisions are being made, they are dealt with as these professional organizations recommend, that there be a plan that would bring in professionals and include parents so that children don't end up being sex trafficked or homeless. That's the problem we're trying to address. They acknowledge that it exists, but I don't hear any proposal to deal with it. This is a proposal that would deal with the very problem that was just confirmed to us. So I hope the committee will support the bill for that reason.
Thank you, Delegate. Clearly, there's considerable passion and concern for students, and I agree with those who express thanks to the family members that came to share a very difficult story. There's considerable sensitivity around these concerns, and I think I hope ultimately, our goal is to protect children, children who are vulnerable, children who face considerable peer pressure and sometimes antagonism in the schools, but also children who experience considerable bullying from adults as well, from society that is not sensitive to or even acknowledging the reality of their own existence. And for all those reasons, I think we need to approach with great caution any efforts to provide support for the children, make sure that they are centered so that their voices are heard and that they have an opportunity to identify safe spaces and safe adults for themselves. And for that reason, I will not be supporting the bill. Is there a motion on the floor? There is no second. The bill fails. Thank you, Delegate.
If I may just offer this to you and the other senator at your leisure, if you may take a look at that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.